healthcare is very reactive. Like you wait until someone is really sick, distressed, stage 4 cancer, and expect them to come to you, right? But then it's very costly and complex. What if you could build data models and predict when people may have future health risks and help them earlier on when it's less costly and complex? And guess what? That philosophy is an engineering philosophy, right? We don't wait for our planes and engines to break down. We measure data so that we know, hey, there's a chance it might break down in the future. I'm going to address it now.
Hey everyone, before we begin this next episode of the Hello Mentor podcast, I just want to say, if you're job searching or hiring, check out hiredly.com. We are not just another job platform. We make it easier to find the jobs that people actually want, and we help companies stand out to hire the right talent. So there's a lot of smart tech and there's a lot of human touch. That's Hiredly. So you can head to hiredly.com and give it a go. Hey everyone, it's another episode of the Hello Mentor podcast. Today I'm very excited because I get to have a chat with Azran, who's a co-founder of Naluri. Hi Azran, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Derek. It's great to be back again.
Yeah, I was just telling Azran off camera just now, I'm so nervous to kind of meet you, because the first time I met Azran was when he was on stage, sharing a lot of this entrepreneurial stories that I was still in the corporate job. So I'm so, I'm really excited to get to kind of have that.
Yeah, well, we've both evolved, right, since then.
Yes. And would you share a bit about yourself and also like what Naluri is doing?
Sure. Well, I think if I look back, right, the last 20 of my 30-year professional career has been more towards building business ventures from scratch, right, across probably a wide range of industries, from building a long-haul airline from scratch, video streaming with iFlix, and now Naluri for the last 8 years. So it might seem random, but the common denominator across all of them, and what really I think drives me, is how do you look at an industry and find ways to make it much more affordable and accessible and convenient for that mass market segment here in Southeast Asia.
Right. So anything consumer related, so it's about convenience, affordable, like this one thing that's always
like
important.
How do you serve consumers? Although most of these businesses ended up being B2B, right? Because sometimes you might serve the end consumer, but how you engage or reach out to them is mainly through enterprise.
Through the enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, actually, right. I've noticed many, I guess startups or platform startup B2C, and then somehow evolve B2B, right?
You gotta follow the money,
right? Because like so you serve the end customer through the business,
right? So here's a little just funny story, right? With iFlix, and most people would think iFlix video streaming is a very consumer proposition, right? To get people to watch TV shows and movies. And when we first started, we thought we'd emulate the idea of offering someone a 30-day free trial and then seeing how people convert to a paid subscription. Hardly anyone did. Right, we experimented with whether it was payment channels, right? Should we make it that you can use your prepaid credit or postpaid bill to pay? Still didn't want to pay. We looked in 2015. What was the number one payment channel in Southeast Asia then? What do you think it was? For the mass market segment.
For the mass market segment, is cash included in this?
Yeah, it was cash and delivery.
It was cash and delivery,
because that was how e-commerce was booming, right? And how does that work with video streaming? We even experimented. Like we would send a guy, or offered to send a guy on a motorcycle to your home to collect your 10 ringgit. Even though it cost me more than 10 ringgit to pay the guy on a motorcycle to collect your 10 ringgit, because you got to run and experiment. And you know what we learned? They still didn't want to pay, right? And so you scratch your head and you realize, okay, they like the product, clearly watching it, but they don't like the idea of having to pay for television. And that spark was, when we were sitting at Mid-Valley wondering what was going on, and we were wearing our iFlix t-shirts, right? This guy walks past and says, hey, you iFlix guys, right? Thanks for introducing iFlix. I love Flash and Gotham and these K-dramas. I'm on my 4th free trial. So you see, they like the content. They were happily moved from a pirated site because the UI UX was much better quality. But the idea of having to pay for TV kind of really didn't connect. then when we reframed it as who will benefit when people watch TV, right? And 2015 was when there was this big shift with mobile telcos, because imagine your business, having almost 50% of your revenues disappearing, right? Probably your phone bills back then were double what they are now, right? Because you used to pay for voice calls, SMSs, and all of that was going. Data was the only revenue stream that was growing for them. And video is the most data-intensive application. So the aha moment came when we talked about, hey, how do we convince this telco CEO to buy iFlix wholesale from us, give it to your customers for free, not as a add-on that you have to pay, and see how much more data they will consume. And what we showed is that they would consume about on average 2 gigabytes more data. And in 2015, how much would you pay for 2 gigabytes of data?
I don't even know how much I paid right now, to be honest. 2 gigabytes is a lot of data, right? In 20...
Back then, right?
Right now, yeah.
It's probably about 20, 30 ringgit, right?
Right.
The wholesale rate was about 7, right? So they could then see this as a real money stream, like give your customer the free car and then sell them gasoline, right? And so that's why it really became a B2B2C business model, which wasn't part of the original idea.
Right. And this, I think, suppose it also, I think it requires a lot of creativity to figure out how to monetize.
A lot of head scratching.
How do you make these decisions, by the way? Like, how do you everyone get in a room and like, hey guys, like what's happening? Like, how do you know? Like,
yeah, sometimes it's late night conversations over meals, over coffee, and you start to draw parallels as well, right? So, for example, that lesson helped me frame Naluri. Likewise, when you think of Naluri, health and well-being, should it be more of a B2C model? But actually, it turns out it's actually how do you serve employers to take care of their employees, right? So it's, again, a B2B2C model. Now, another kind of, you see why the multiple industry perspective helps, right? One of the big problems in healthcare that I wanted to tackle was payments. Do you think it's weird that your doctor gets paid irrespective of whether you actually get healthy or not, right? Like, it's just a fee for service, irrespective of outcomes.
right.
Now, in the airline industry, the one thing that would keep an airline CEO and CFO up at night is if your engine breaks down. It's the most expensive part of the plane, right? And if it breaks down, your MRO, your maintenance repair service provider, charges you a lot for maintenance fees and spare parts and all of that, right? So they actually benefit at your misery when the engine's down, right? So they actually want to see it keep breaking down. So there's this misalignment of
Incentives, right?
yeah, right? So what airlines did is to say, let me enter into what's called a power by the hour arrangement, a long-term 10-year contract. I pay you a fixed fee, maybe with an escalation factor, per hour that the engine flies. You take care of that engine within that cost. So that way it allows me to better manage my costs, and it incentivizes you to take good care of my engine every time it goes in for an overhaul so that it doesn't break down as often, right? So we align incentive. Could we not do that with healthcare? Right? No one was looking at it this way. So sometimes when you can bring different perspectives from different industries, perhaps it might spark some new ideas.
Right. Yeah, I suppose sometimes it's like, because the industry sort of, everything starts out like maybe with a good idea, and then as it evolved over 10, 20, 30, 40 years, no one really thinks about it so much.
You start to assume that's how we do things, right? Versus going, hey, hang on, is there a different lens?
Yes. I want to kind of go back a little bit to sort of your childhood and upbringing. Yeah.
Okay.
I always find when I meet many entrepreneurial kind of personalities, it's somehow anchored in something from the past or when they're young. And was there I think we did some research. So describe yourself as a restless kid before.
I'm sure I was. Hard to handle.
Yes. Was that what was that like growing up? Were there any moments there that you felt really influenced the way you are?
Boy, it is a very long time ago. But I think a few things. One, I never felt I fit in well with the kind of your regular peers in your school cohort. And most of the time, the boys would want to play football at the taman, the field. and probably I wasn't as great of an athlete. So I ended up trying to figure out how do I do things on my own, or even convince the younger kids, come join me, right? We create our own games, whether it was the Olympics or, World Cup with pieces of cardboard and, all these little things that you just kind of do as kids. But I loved putting it all together, like organizing it, And even in the kind of like, if I were to think back to like some of the crazy, what we now call entrepreneurial ideas, but for me, like, I'm bored on weekends, right? And I remember like my mom would be willing to pay me 50 cents to go to the neighborhood sundry shop and buy something, right? So I'm like, what would it take to actually do that for other neighbors as well, right? So that if I go for one trip, I can help more people and get more, right? So I remember, for example, like the big decision, maybe as a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, to figure out how do I create my first advertising thing, like this piece of paper. In those days, even before photocopy, there was something called a cyclo-style machine, right? Like, 3 cents for every 100 copies, where they, you basically generate, you just write, if you want to have something bought from your store, call this home number, Azran will come to your home, get your money, buy stuff from you and deliver it over, just to occupy myself in my weekends, right? Just kind of running all these crazy little things.
Right. And I think, so from here, I mean, it's interesting you say you're not athletic when you're young, because you're like a triathlete now, right?
Well, yeah, maybe I was in, so the thing about running, cycling, swimming is it's kind of very consistent, right? Perhaps maybe football, right? Like, because it does require a certain, skill set that probably I didn't have. I was probably not as coordinated with my legs.
And I suppose that, and then you sort of then created your own games, and you organize your own games,
right?
And do you think that's how somehow this instills this mindset that you can just do things on yourself? Like,
I think so.
You don't need to join.
Yeah. And I think, look, the other advantage I had, right? Both my parents were university professors. And I remember even as like 4-year-old, 5-year-old, they would sometimes bring their colleagues back home for dinner, right? And I remember all these university professors would grill me, like, how was your day? Or what do you think of this? And so at a very early age, I was given a chance to speak up and have an opinion, right? I think perhaps a lot of my peers were just told, keep quiet and, don't get in trouble. But I had that advantage, right? Like very early on to be able to get the encouragement to speak up, to articulate your ideas, to have parents that allowed me to do different things, right?
Right. It's interesting also because when I think of university professors, I actually imagine like a stereotypical university professor is very, I don't know how to describe it, but not entrepreneurial by nature, right?
Yeah, they're definitely not entrepreneurial in terms of the risk-taking nature,
right,
but they're very inquisitive, right? And so simply asking questions and making you kind of think and speak, I think help build that confidence, right? To even just have your original thought.
Right. So it's just to train you like critical thinking and like curiosity.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, that's amazing. But I always find that, curiosity is a very important trait, I feel. Not just in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of leadership and when you're innovating. Right? I'm not even sure if it's easy to teach it. It somehow feels like something that you have to learn at a very young age.
Yeah, right. So even, for example, right, like did you grow up in an environment where you were told what to do and you had to stick to doing it, versus, let's say in my case, if I saw a friend playing the guitar and I'm like, I want to learn how to play the guitar, and my mom was like, okay, well, let's set it up. And 6 months later, I'm like completely bored of it because I'm not good at it, and she's like, okay, well, move on to the next thing, right? I never felt constrained to kind of stick to doing something that I didn't like, but I was allowed to explore and do things that I felt interesting, right? I think that played a big part, right, in being open to new ideas or new experiences, irrespective of what the outcome is going to be. I think that your formative years would really go a long way towards shaping that.
Right. And you grew up to be, I mean, sounds like you grew up as like more or less like a free child, right? Given
Yeah, right. And I think like, even if you then take it to university, perhaps one of the privileges I had was going to an American university, which had more academic freedom, right? So, for example, I had to do electrical engineering. I had no interest in it, but mainly because back in the 1980s, you were given 4 choices, right? Medicine, law, accounting, engineering. Medicine, they study too long, blood, don't like. Law and accounting, no pictures and textbooks. So engineering was the least of the evils. So it was just my ticket to get out of the country and explore. And going to the US, right? Like I remember, okay, how do I take the bare minimum number of engineering classes to satisfy that piece of paper? But how do I use all the other flexibility to take classes in history and economics and sociology, ballroom dancing, sailing, just to try different things. So that for me was another very both enriching and informative experience. Just kind of jump into new topics just to learn, right? And the US is also a system where it was less exam oriented. It was not about like how well you remembered facts in your textbooks, but we had these groups, and like sometimes between 30 to 50% of your grade is how do you argue against the textbook, right? And your professors made you do that. So that also, I think, really helped me kind of both be comfortable with learning new fields, but then also grilling and challenging. Well, just because it's written in a textbook doesn't mean it's right? Maybe you may need a different application for a different context.
Right. And it makes you sort of sharpen your thinking.
Yeah, right.
Right. And again, like thinking critically and all that.
Absolutely.
And it's also interesting that you mentioned that in your elective subjects, you picked a lot of art-related stuff. Right?
Absolutely. Loved it. I loved it even more.
Right.
Now, also maybe look, because my late father was an economics professor, right? So there was this whole curiosity, like you grew up looking at all the books he wrote and what, in his scary study room, like there was a little bit of osmosis, right?
Right. I always find that it's if you can combine both the science and art, you have I think the scientific process is obviously very logical, very analytical step, and the artistic process is kind of sometimes there's certain things you can't really describe.
Absolutely.
And you have to marry these two worlds together.
Yeah.
Right.
So I talk about now marrying between physical world and biological worlds, because many engineers, especially, right, when you're trained on the laws of physics, right, E equals mc squared, PV equals nRT, the weight of an atom is fixed, the speed of light is a constant, right? So you expect things to happen a certain way. But now when you become a leader, you're dealing with people. We're humans. We're biological systems, right? Where, for example, the whale's stomach changes depending on a few degrees of temperature difference in the ocean because the food sources become different. Even our DNA makeup in our body, our genes, how they express changes depending on our environment and the people we hang out. So what we now learn with epigenetics, despite, for example, I have 2 Malay parents, they gave me the triple crown. I've got the diabetes gene, the hypertension gene, the high cholesterol gene. But that doesn't mean it's your destiny, right? So how you live your life and the people you hang out with can literally turn these genes off and on. So when it comes to humans and leading humans, right, like Derek on a Monday is different from Derek on a Tuesday. Derek in the morning is different from Derek in the afternoon. So you can't assume this is how I want everyone on my team to operate. It doesn't work that way.
I know, right? It's super messy. I'm learning this in real time. Like,
yeah.
Even like today.
So I love the craziness of that. Yeah.
Right. And as someone that's operating like I consider myself like a more introverted, analytical personality. Yeah, sometimes it does frustrate me that why isn't it very clear to them why is it doing it and all that, and just over time you just learn to accept, well, but people are different, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they're emotional creatures, and you still have to sort of connect with that part.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And it's it's a learning process. Well, I mean, it's all related. I remember, there's once I was on this journey of giving a lot of feedback, and I always felt that how come sometimes no one's listening to the feedback, and then they took it a bit as criticism. And I later realized it's because I never invested in having that relationship with them, which made them feel like it was like an attack, rather than, I care about you, I want you to succeed, that's why I'm telling you this.
Exactly.
So it's like, that's part. Right. So you call this the biological and the physical?
Yeah, like kind of a biological lens of how you look at things versus a physical lens of looking at things, or an engineering, way of looking at it.
Right.
We love frameworks as engineers, but humans are different.
And take us back to like when you decided to start Naluri. Like, what was the story there?
Well, look, I think number one, iFlix was amazing the first couple of years because, I liked that whole payment experiment. There was a lot of different experiments trying to figure out what the model is, figuring out how to make it work in Malaysia versus Indonesia versus the Philippines. It then grew quite successfully in, by Series C, there was a lot of money being raised, and it was about templatizing the execution, take what we know in Southeast Asia, roll it out to South Asia, Middle East, Africa, right? So it was kind of maturing. So a lot of it then suddenly became keep the system stable and consistent. So in a way, like the little kid that loves to rock the boat now is expected to be the steady hand that helms the ship. Not as exciting. But there was one coffee conversation that I had after the iFlix Series C round. Sometimes you get a bit reflective, right? After completing a major milestone, and this guy talked about finding your life's purpose, and we talked about the Ikigai framework, right? If you're familiar with it, basically, in a nutshell, could you find the intersection between what's the skill that people pay you for with what's your passion, what energizes you, and what's a big problem the world cares deeply about? So I said, well, looking back at my past experiences, people have valued my business building skills, writing business plans, raising money, putting teams together, getting partnerships done, growing a team. Okay, what are you passionate about? And I said immediately, triathlons. What do you like about triathlons? I said, well, it's one of these things where it's not how physically strong you are, but how mentally resilient you are to just kind of keep going and going and going despite pain and setback, right? Okay. And so what's a big problem you care about in the world, right? And as I had that conversation, I said, the thing that's really connected to me is how our societies today are being polarized between the haves and have-nots, right? The 1% versus 99%. And you see that, right, with Trump and Brexit and all these things that's tearing our societies apart. And so when I look back at my AirAsia X experience, iFlix experience, it's about, well, how do we make things more affordable and accessible to that mass market segment? So that's like a little part to close that gap. So then this guy said, well, it sounds like if you put it together, maybe you should find a way to build something that helps people become more mentally resilient, and address this big problem. And, sometimes you have a coffee conversation, but this time I was like, whoa, hang on a second, because I just immediately remembered visiting my former Stanford classmate. We were playing Ultimate Frisbee together like 25 years ago. He's a co-founder of a health tech company in San Francisco called Omada Health. And they were initially tackling diabetes especially, but through a behavioral health lens, right? Like moods, mindsets, motivations, rather than telling you what you need to do. And I said, this is really interesting, because I then had lost my dad to diabetes and cancer. And how suddenly like you just start thinking about it, you realize, 3 problems stood out. Now I shared one problem with you, which was the payment part, right? But there were a couple of other problems. Number one, healthcare is very reactive. Like you wait until someone is really sick, distressed, stage 4 cancer, and expect them to come to you, right? But then it's very costly and complex. What if you could build data models and predict when people may have future health risks and help them earlier on when it's less costly and complex. And guess what? That philosophy is an engineering philosophy, right? We don't wait for our planes and engines to break down. We measure data so that we know, hey, there's a chance it might break down in the future. I'm going to address it now. The second issue is, if you've noticed, healthcare today is very siloed by specialization. Every doctor is only looking at one part of you, right? The cardiologist just looks at your heart. The oncologist just looks at your cancer cells. The dietitian just looks at what you eat. But humans, we're not compartmentalized, right? We're a holistic body. And no one was addressing that link between mental and physical health, right? And as I was kind of going through these discussions, I realized that was kind of the challenge that my dad went through. Because as his situation deteriorated, doctors just tell you, like, okay, take this medication, do this surgery, do this procedure. But when you don't address the inevitable depression and anxiety that chronic disease patients go through, right? Skip chemo sessions, miss medication, and things just get worse. But the hospital system today is not geared towards helping people with the moods, mindsets, and motivations to really keep going. So I felt, could we imagine a new way of delivering care that combines mental and physical health? And of course, the third is payments. Now, there's another fourth problem that was really fascinating in our early days. Why I wanted to do this was in emerging markets, because I always look at an emerging market lens. So the other issue we have is that we don't have enough healthcare professionals. So with mental health, for example, we have between 1/50th to 1/100th the number of mental health professionals per population compared to Australia or the UK or the US, right? And so if you simply do what the US does, you just don't have enough people. Like in Malaysia, for example, if you added up all the counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists, nationally we have the capacity to help a few 100,000 people, but between 4 to 6 million Malaysians need help, right? And if you were to go through the public health system, your wait list to see a clinical psychologist may be 3 to 6 months, right? So clearly, like, if you simply just do what other people do, you're not going to tackle this. So I kind of armed with, these are really cool problems to start. I want to do this. And I started with one LinkedIn post. I really want to tackle this problem. I'm looking for one intern to help me, right? And 220 people wrote in, right? And I just found this one amazing person who we sent. And we just started, like, saying, hey, who do we talk to? What kind of simple experiments do we run? And so my first goal with her was, hey, let's try to list down 100 people that we can talk to, just to see whether the problems we wanted to tackle is relevant to them, and the approach we want to take is different from what they're already doing, right? So let's just talk to anyone we could, whether it was doctors and hospital directors and insurance CEOs and company CEOs, pharmaceutical companies, just kind of connect, right? And I think number 57 was my former mentee way back when I was at McKinsey, and she had become the managing partner for McKinsey in Singapore. We were just having breakfast in KL, and she goes, I really need to introduce you to Jeremy. He's just as obsessed with this problem as you are, right? Here's his number, go have coffee. And that coffee with Jeremy just, we just like went, and I flew down to Singapore, hung out in Jeremy's apartment. We just spent the night talking about it, and we're like, dude, let's build this together.
Wow.
Yeah.
And does Jeremy have any sort of like technical?
Jeremy is a medical doctor.
He's a medical doctor.
Trained doctor, right. A neuroscience specialist, and had been leading McKinsey's healthcare practice for like 6 years, right? But just advising companies, right? And I think his mentor, Danny, probably thought, you can see the guy just kind of itching to want to build something rather than just advise, right?
Right. So it's true. He's like, his very strong medical experience combined with your background.
Yeah.
Right. Of like not just building companies, but sort of like thinking creatively out of the box.
Yeah. Right.
Also thinking like an engineer.
Yeah.
How you solve problems. Right. And you want to scan, and also sounds like one issue, as you mentioned, is that there's just not enough like medical professionals to serve the whole country.
That's right.
So you want to do this in a way that scales.
Right, because everyone I think for a lot of people, especially in the world of digital and AI, there's a tendency to fall into what I call the paper to PDF trap. Right? Let's say this is how we do things offline in the physical world, and we just use digital to do the same thing, just a little bit more convenient, right? So for example, to me, telemedicine is that. So instead of going to a physical hospital clinic, I can book a session, speak to a doctor online. Yeah, it's more convenient, don't have to worry with parking, but it doesn't fundamentally change these core problems, right? It's still reactive. They still wait for people to be sick and expect them to reach out for help. It's still very siloed. You're booking a session with one particular specialist, and it's just fee for a session rather than what kind of actual health improvement, right? Should I get rewarded for taking care of your health? Right? It's a bit like now, imagine if you just use ChatGPT for Google search. That would significantly limit the potential, right? But that's why most people, when they think of digital, this is how I used to do things. I just use it now to become incrementally better rather than reimagining an entire way of, serving people, because you now have new technologies at your disposal.
Right. So you can obviously use ChatGPT for way more.
Way more, right? But a lot of people still just use it how they would use it at Google search before.
Right. So how does Naluri actually work? Let's say if I use it. What is that?
Yeah, so there's a few components, because what we're trying to do is help people at an earlier stage. So you remember, you're not yet distressed, right? But you might have early risks. So we now work mainly with corporate employers. One, we do a lot of health promotion campaigns, right? So sometimes we run a full annual campaign, right? Different months might have different campaigns, which also have health assessments, right? So we actually encourage employees to do mental health assessments confidentially. We actually get depression scores, anxiety scores, stress scores. We then do low-cost blood tests, right? Your HbA1c blood sugar, your cholesterol profile, weight, blood pressure. These things actually have very strong statistical predictive power to predict future very costly and complex heart diseases, kidney failure, etc., diabetes. And so once you do that, then you can have a heat map, right? Hey, by age group, by gender, by business units, where are like these early risk hotspots? How do we then encourage people to want to get help? So the second part is, how do you help people? And there's two ways. One, digital coaching. So everyone can get access to my own healthcare team. A psychologist, a dietitian, a doctor, a fitness coach. We even added an executive coach and a financial planner, because very quickly you realize the number one and number two cause of stress for most of employees, my boss and money, right? And so I need specific tools to help me deal with that, right? The psychologist can help me cope, but I really need actionable tools how I can address that. And they work as a team online to support you for the whole year, right? And finally, the third part is, how do we collect all the data and show that, it's leading to improvements in health, improvements in sick leave, improvements in, medical cost escalation that can then quantify an ROI for organizations.
Right. It does also sound like stress management is one
It's a huge part, right? Stress and sleep, probably the number one and number two areas that we most commonly help employees with.
Right. So they all start with obviously it's some kind of mental health questionnaire, with a blood test. So you try to marry the physical side.
Correct. And there's a big link, right, between depression and your blood sugar, anxiety, and your blood pressure. A lot of links.
Oh, is that right? And in what way would it be linked? Is it more because, let's say, if I'm very stressed, then I might take more sugary stuff? Is it how it works?
And the reason why there was a big spike in COVID, guess what happened in COVID? We were isolated, we were lonely, we suddenly had food delivery, right? We were more sedentary, right? So less social, more sedentary, more easy, fast food access. That quickly led to higher blood sugar, higher blood pressure, higher cholesterol in rates that I would have normally expected people in their late 30s, early 40s. We were seeing it in people late 20s, early 30s, right? So in a way, that whole COVID experience accelerated these chronic disease symptoms much sooner.
Right. I guess many people don't realize that indirect nature of these things. Because of this, some other thing happens, but it may not be obvious.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? And you you just look at the data and say, oh, based on like this person that I think they need help with like stress management.
Absolutely right. Now, post-COVID, what are we seeing? We're seeing medical costs for virtually every organization skyrocketing, right? About 20% year on year, right? And so people are going, whoa, hang on a second. What do we do about this, right? Because you can't just simply say, find me another insurer that will give me a bit cheaper, because your employees are claiming a lot more because they're not healthy, right? So how do we go back to the root cause and put in like a proper system, just like that aircraft engine? Don't wait until it breaks down. Do all the predictive and preventive maintenance, right? Shouldn't we be doing that same philosophy with our own humans?
Right. And you mentioned earlier that one challenge is, people don't, like let's say, automatically go seek help for maybe health issues.
Yes.
And all that. And because Naluri is an app, right? So you obviously try to combine the human and the technology, right? Wouldn't it be a bigger challenge then, like to get the like, hey, I need you to talk to someone?
Yeah, look, so that's a big part, right? Normally, in year one, maybe only 10 or 20% of employees would reach out and use it, right? Because there's still a lot of stigma. But over time, they see their friends kind of benefiting from it. Word of mouth comes around. By year 2, year 3, each year you get another 10% more people wanting to use it because they kind of see the benefits and they realize, okay, none of this data is going to HR or going to my boss, right? And I can see people benefiting from it. And the younger generation are a lot more willing, right, to get help online.
Yes, because I think there's so much less stigma about among the younger gen.
So the reason why the physical health part is interesting is, the Gen Z and the younger millennials, generally not a problem to say, hey, you now have access to professional healthcare. Great, they'll use it. We now have an interesting, like I would call it the 45 to 54 segment. So typically, they're more senior in the company, and they're like the sandwich generation. So at work, I got to deal directly with the top boss and the pressure, of performance and all that. And I've got to manage my young Gen Z team, and they're like, need so much of my attention. At home, I got to deal with aging parents and young kids, right? That dual pressure is causing a lot of stress for that group, right? So if I went to them and I said, hey, I'm here to help you with your depression, anxiety, we're not interested. Hey, I'm here to help you kind of cope with these dual pressures, both kind of your bosses, your team, your parents, your kids, They start to be like, okay, tell me how you can do that, right? How to help me kind of structure all these different things. What do I do one day at a time? The accountability, checking in every week.
Right. So I guess because of the whole stigma around mental health, if you use the word depression, anxiety, it's a very big, scary word.
But just kind of coping with all your pressures, you start to, and when we start to show them, look, your blood pressure is kind of very elevated, your cholesterol is very elevated, would you like to do something about it?
Right. And the way you use the app, are there certain areas where you then hand off to some human, or is it always purely on the app?
No. So not necessarily. So to me, the medium is just a channel, right? So for example, we start with an app. But today, blue collar workers, they don't want another app. Everything has to be done with WhatsApp or Line in Thailand, Viber in the Philippines. Office workers, I don't want another app, right? I want it on web, and just like how WhatsApp would work with a laptop, you use WhatsApp web. Or even now, we've integrated Naluri into Microsoft Teams, because many white-collar employees and banks and telcos are deeply embedded into the Teams environment. So you got to be where they are, right? Or in some cases, for example, some of our bigger clients, you know what, we're kind of really a bit stretched with this digital thing. Can you have someone on site from us, like every Friday, 2 or 3 people, so that people can book sessions and meet one-on-one with their psychologists or counselors or dietitians, so that there's more kind of human support.
Right. And I see. Right. And so the reason I ask is, obviously hardly we also we have 2 kinds of businesses. We have a portal, which is a digital platform business, and we also have an agency, like a recruitment agency. And for many years, we've tried to marry these 2 worlds together, taking this hybrid approach, right? And the whole idea was that the agency is very effective because you're talking to a human, but it scales very poorly, very labor intensive, right? So I've always in my mind, like, what kind of framework will you use to know when you hand off from a digital experience and now you're going to a human?
Yeah. Usually it's the severity of it, right? Because if, someone is at a critical state, you really want to be able to call them directly, even if it's 2:00 at night, see them in person,
Right.
until things are stabilized again.
Right. So you need to, as in the platform needs to know like this person needs to talk to someone.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting. And you've expanded beyond Malaysia recently. How was that experience?
Well, look, I think this is one of a challenge of being in a Malaysian startup, right? Because our addressable market is way too small, right? And if you wanted to get the attention of international investors, they're not going to look at you if you're only here in Malaysia. So I think we have to take on a lot more execution risk earlier on, right? Like even at Series A, we had to show we can build and grow in Indonesia, in Singapore. Then we went to Thailand, and of course now we're looking at kicking off in Philippines and Vietnam as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then, what's it like scaling in the, I know, I understand that a lot of international investors see Southeast Asia as one market, but it's really not.
No.
Right?
I look at it as 3 main tiers, or maybe there's 4, but basically like, okay, level 1 is Singapore, right? Somehow like a lot of capital goes there. 2 is what they call VIP, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, because of the large markets there. So Malaysia, Thailand, we're tier 3.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, well, let's just do something, right? So you gotta punch above your weight and make more noise just for them to even notice you, because you're not coming from a market that they're focused on.
But also like culturally and everything, it's very different in every market. Or do you think so? Maybe.
Oh, for sure. But I also think Malaysians, I think by nature, we're probably more adventurous. We're more willing to kind of go out there and meet and, build. I see more of us going out than I see, for example, Thai founders coming here, right? Or Indonesian founders coming here. They start to, but generally at a later stage, right? We tend to go out earlier on.
Right. I wonder if it's because of like we have quite, obviously we're a very multiracial country.
I think that there's a little bit of that whole kind of like, we just have to go out, right? Because we don't have these big markets. Like in Indonesia, you can be a unicorn just being a pure domestic player. You can't do that here.
You can't, right? That's right. So you have to go out very early. Was there any challenge in terms of localizing the way you deliver the platform?
No, that's one of the things I learned from iFlix, right? iFlix had to be hyper local, right? It starts with the local team that you hire, right? How you deliver, language, culture, everything needs to feel like, you know what? This is my local version.
Right.
So it's boots on the ground. Like each of our countries, there's a local delivery team.
I have a hiring question.
Sure.
And the reason I ask is because, obviously I've tried hiring a lot of senior people myself, and I hear many startups who've expanded region. They tell me that the number one thing that makes or breaks it is that the GM that you're hiring.
Yes.
I think it's so important.
Yes.
And then you're new to it, and then I don't think anyone's ever given a very clear answer how to hire or identify this GM. How would you?
Look, I think even at Naluri, our success rate might be like 50% at best. So the more you gotta have that in mind, right? Like there's no formula to find out like this is the right person, right? But a few things stand out. I think number one is, when you talk to leaders, are they comfortable being in a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty, you don't have a lot of resources? Because many typical senior hires, when they come from larger organizations, they're used to having big teams to execute, right? So have they shown that they've been in environments where they had to make something out of nothing, figure out scrappily how to get resources, right? How do you build teams from scratch? I think that's usually like a big indicator. And in that process, how many times have they fallen down and had to pick themselves back up, right? Versus, if you come from a big corporate, that really happens because it's a very low tolerance for failure, big high risk aversion. But you can find people who kind of have been in these situations. You do want them to have some kind of domain knowledge in that market. So, for example, our CEO in Indonesia, Dr. Hafiz, is also a medical doctor, but he's also been in a couple of health tech startups where he was employee number one. Okay, like figure out how you make this work, right? So that kind of combination, I think, is very helpful.
Right. Also very rare. Right.
Yeah, right. But that's why, as a founder, like I went there, parked myself, got an apartment, brought my bicycle to Jakarta, hung out there on weekends. What you cannot do with international expansion and expect that you can enter to a market, flying in, flying out, going with your suitcase in and out to or from the airport, doesn't work. You got to commit, right? Like you got to be there, part of the ecosystem,
Right.
that city.
So you have to live there.
Yeah, then you kind of know people, meet people, okay, like, and then you get much better advice, right?
Right. Yeah, and also I find that with many senior people, they almost always interview very well. That's part of the reason why they rise to that level.
Right.
So being able to sort of figure out, like, is it just this person just a great communicator, or do they actually know what they're doing?
Right, exactly.
Right. It's really important.
So, for example, like now, like I'm getting ready to open up Philippines. That's like one of my personal pet things that I'm focused on, right? So, like next week when I head over to Manila, I'm already looking at some apartments, right? And then like, okay, which Christmas parties can I attend, right? So that you're part of that local fabric.
I see. And how long do you live at one stretch? Like,
Probably Indonesia, for example, was a couple of years. Now, like my Indonesia team goes, don't have to come down. We're good.
so you were doing more or less in Indonesia for a few years.
Oh yeah, right. Like, but now probably like once every other month. Certain town halls I go down, hang out with the team, or meet a few clients. But for the most part, they can run it autonomously.
Right. Interesting. And now, so Philippines is your next thing, right? The other thing I want to ask is, because you wouldn't see yourself. Is this mental health? It's beyond mental health now, right? What the platform is doing, I feel like the science of health evolves very fast. I mean, I don't know whether because I spent too much time on Twitter or X, but everyone's like shouting, "Oh, we found this new thing! We found this new research." Stuff like that. Like, is it challenging you to keep up with the science about?
A little bit, but coming from that emerging markets lens, we tend to find like, how do we make this simple enough so that you can roll out and scale? So my big mission now with my team is, what can we do to make mental health insurable? That is the ultimate test. Today, you got to pay out of pocket, right? Either as a retail consumer or even if it's a company, you're paying extra on top of your health insurance because your health insurance does not cover mental health and therapy and coaching. What would it take to make that happen?
Oh, right.
Right? So like that's my big crazy goal, right? Is can we build the data sets and show how you can deliver care cost effectively that insurers will go, this is something I want to add on and bundle because I know it's going to reduce my future claims.
I see. Right. All right. So mental health is not your right. It is insurable in the US, right? Yeah, right.
It is, yeah, but not here. Here it's only for certain psychiatric conditions, which is basically medication. But then it's very, very late stage serious, right? But let's say if you're going through a depressive episode and you need therapy, you are going to pay that out of pocket.
Right. Which is maybe partially also why many people don't seek help because it's very expensive.
Exactly.
To see a counselor.
So how do you make it more affordable and eventually be bundled with insurance?
Right. Yes. And I love the fact how you talk about, how the mental and the physical sort of combine. I mean, just from a personal experience, right? When I was much younger, I remember there's once I had, really, I was going through a lot of stress on the personal life. And I didn't realize it was the stress, but physically I felt like there's a lot of tingling in my body all the time. And I thought there was something wrong with me, physically. I was so convinced, there's something wrong with me physically. And then later I obviously I spoke to some professionals, many different, and I just later, I was living in the UK then, I was in the UK, so, and then I was speaking to a lot of professionals in Malaysia, because it's so expensive to see a doctor. And then one of them said that, I think it's time for you to come home. And then I was very confused. Like, I'm looking for your doctor. Why are you asking me to come home? And then later, I think in hindsight, I realized, I think what he's realizing is it's not really a physical thing. I think you miss home, or you're very stressed, and right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think of even the simple idea of a placebo, right? In the field of medicine, placebos generally have a huge real impact, right? Like if I give you, maybe let's say it's just a sugar pill, but if I tell you it's going to help you with your high blood pressure, it can actually have a noticeable improvement because your mind believes it, right? There's this really cool experiment that was done with hotel cleaners. These women who go to hotel rooms and clean, right? And one group was told, first they were asked, do you guys exercise? Oh, no, we're really busy. We work late. No time for exercise. And then one group was told, all the work that you do cleaning the room, that is exercise, right? So when you change the bed sheets, that's the equivalent to doing like these number of squats, right? When you clean the bathroom, it's equivalent to doing like these lunges and all that, right? Another group was told, because your work, you just have no time for exercise, it's going to affect your health. Later, when you measure them, you can see the people who believed that their work or was told that their work was exercise became healthier. So this is amazing. The mind is not a different entity from the body, right? When the mind kind of starts to believe and focus on something positive, it will affect your physical health, right?
Right.
So you can't decouple your mental and physical health. They are deeply interrelated.
Right. No, in fact, I know. I mean, even again, like a person, I know a lot of people that say, for example, they might have some physical issue, and they'll go to a doctor to see that physical issue. But I would even wonder, is it like a stress thing that's manifesting itself?
Exactly.
And you're kind of seeing the wrong doctor. But how would someone know? This is the thing that I don't have the answer for.
Well, so in a way, on one hand, you can say we humans, we manifest kind of these unhealthy signs differently, right? So, for example, think about what is diabetes, okay? Diabetes is a condition when your insulin hormone is not effective in controlling blood sugar, and that's why your blood sugar levels rise, right? So either you don't have enough insulin or your insulin's become ineffective, okay? What's depression and anxiety? Well, we have a few other sets of hormones. Dopamine to make you kind of focus and energize, and serotonin to make you calm. These things, hormones, can also sometimes, like insulin, not function effectively, right? And that causes kind of mood swings. And there's also a link with insulin, and that's why there's this link between depression and diabetes, right? And so our body's ability, let's say when we're under stress, for some people, it affects their dopamine and serotonin. For some other people, it affects the insulin, right? So some people will see it in high blood sugar, and some people will see it in anxiety episodes. So it's not like remember what I said, we biological systems, changes in temperature, changes in our environment, changes how our genes are expressed, our body expresses either a healthy outlook or a unhealthy outlook. So we're different. We can't use an engineering formula that says under this condition it's this thing, but that's also what makes it fascinating.
Right. It's all connected, right? I heard this saying before, and I think it's true. So if you have like a physical problem, you fix it with the mind. If a mind problem, fix it with the body or something. But I think the whole point of the whole thing is
interrelated.
Interrelated, right? And then sometimes if you don't have enough sleep, that affects your mood, which become so everything is kind of connected.
Absolutely.
Right. And for yourself, right, Azra, I mean, again, I'm building a company now, and I know that there's so many ups and downs. I'm sure you go through a lot of ups and downs.
Which founder doesn't, right?
Yes, and you're also building a company that's very anchored on this like overall health, mental health thing, right? But how do you personally handle? I guess two questions, like A, maybe could you run us through like a really challenging moment building Naluri, and then related to that, how do you manage the stress at those times?
Gosh, like how many can I choose from? Look, obviously the early days seemed really hard because how do you convince someone to pay you money instead of just doing free trials when you don't have a track record? So that's really, really hard, right? And I think we were very fortunate with, one of our big clients here because they kind of knew me by, reputation in the corporate sector. They're willing to run, kind of paid experiments that work well and we could scale. Very soon, COVID happened. All of our clients said, look, all this mental, physical health, not important. COVID was become a priority, right? So, zero revenue. How are you going to survive? Like 3 months, no revenue. What are we going to do? We stopped taking salaries. We told everyone to take a pay cut. But at that point, the team was small enough. Maybe we could go on for another month or two. And suddenly by, I'm going to call it like around August, September that year, all these big companies started calling us because they were seeing employees who were burnt out and depressed and even expressing suicidal ideation. And they needed a digital solution because everyone was working remotely. So we're like, we can do that, right? So the big band, the big telco, the big airline all kind of started reaching out for us, and we kind of grew very significantly. And that allowed us to raise a pretty decent size Series A round in 2021. Of course, then you're like, oh, okay, now we got to expand, right? Let's open up in Indonesia and Singapore. And next thing you realize, oh, wow, right? Funding environments completely dried up, right, by the end of 2022. And by 2023, we're like, oh, this is not good, right? Like our burn rate was way too high and there was still a lot of challenges, and the likelihood of us raising another round that year was slim to none. So we had to make a very, very tough decision. It's one of my most painful decisions to sort of like shrink the company down, right? It's a tough call, right? Because if I don't do it, then we're not going to survive, right? But how do you make that decision? That was really brutal. It kept me up at night for many, many nights, right? Even for the whole year, we were going to go through this process of how do we make next month's payroll? How do we make next month's payroll? Again and again and again. And even 2024, that was still tough, right? There was not a lot of capital available. Until finally, in July this year, we were able to kind of raise our next round. But there have just been so many, like, kind of, are we even going to make it? Like even March this year, right? Because it was in a fasting month. Payroll is due. Most people kind of like, hey, can you pay me before Hari Raya, right? But client invoices suddenly became late. Then your Indonesia team says, hey, we have our 13th month salary, right? Oh, you're like, how are we going to make this? Like, it was just insane, right? Just trying to figure out, like, how do you pull it off? I don't know even really how. We just had to figure out this one day at a time.
Right. And you just kept going. How do you keep that belief? It's going to figure this out.
I think by myself it would have been hard, but that's where I think, like, for me, I got a lot of strength from Jeremy. Jeremy tends to be the calmer founder, right? The more anxious founder. And of course, I've got a really good team with, Aiden, Tiffany, Ahmed, our leadership team, Kenneth. Like, just kind of help and support each other. Like, okay, because some days I'm down and I need to be picked up, and some days they're down and I pick them up, right? But trying to go through it alone, super hard. That's why I'm not a believer in solo founder models, because the founder journey is just way too intense.
Yes, it is. I am literally that solo founder, and I find that I do rely so much on having a strong leadership team around me. Like, you have to really cultivate that relationship and trust, and I'm very lucky. And over the last 10 years, I've changed. Like, even the leadership team has changed quite a lot. And there's always this, and I love the team and all that, but of course the founder's still going to be the founder, right? And you so know that people can still leave if they want to.
Yes.
But the founder can almost never leave, right? Like, so this is it, right? You're gonna go all the way to the end.
Right.
Yeah.
Investors have given you capital, like, you can't just walk away from it.
Yes. And I think that's why also, like, psychologically, a lot of founders, I mean, you carry this weight, but also you're just forced to figure it out because you don't have any other choice, right?
Yeah. And I think maybe I also kind of have to keep reminding myself, look, I've also been through really hard times before. Like, for example, in the airline, there were moments when we were running on fumes, right? We needed to raise money. It had to be done through an IPO, but then by late 2012, there was no appetite for an IPO because everybody's waiting for the general elections to be called, which was only called in like May 2013. I even had to beg our fuel supplier for 30 days because I just had nothing else. And I said, look, if you guys cut us off, we're dead, right? Like, no fuel, no flights, no one's going to ever want to fly with us again. And I didn't have any like turnaround plan or restructuring proposal. I just begged, right? So, like, when you have to go through that, like, okay, you know what? Life keeps going on, right? Those moments you keep reminding yourself, okay, you know what? I've been through that, right? Or take 2014. So that was hard, right? And then 2013, boom, big IPO. I was on CNBC and CNN and Bloomberg, and you think you're some kind of star, but life has a way of just knocking you right back down, right? 2014, not one, not two, three black swan events, right? MH70 in March, and then MH17 in July, and then December QZ8501, and although none with the ones directly under mine, the impact on business was brutal, because by then 70% of our business was China and Australia, and those incidents caused travel demand from China and Australia to plummet, right? Like deep crisis.
Right. And that's right. And then as the leader, you have to kind of roll with it, like, to figure out.
And I think, to me, when I look back at the experience, probably the most painful yet most valuable professional lesson for me, we touched on this earlier, where humans, we know we're emotional creatures. The higher up you go in leadership, the more emotion matters over facts, logics, and spreadsheets, right? I thought in a moment of crisis, we're supposed to be decisive, take charge, right? I had this perfect turnaround strategy. But my board didn't want to go along with it, because you realize in times of crisis, people also fear makes them not be open to new ideas. And the more you try to push something new, the more people resist. Like, I'm sure you might have had a friend or family member during COVID who was reluctant to take a vaccine. Imagine if you just went to them and said, hey, look at all the WHO vaccine efficacy research and all the facts and data. You think you're going to convince them? Right? The more you try to do that, the more what you're telling them is, I'm smart, you're stupid.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to feel that way, right? That's exactly what was happening even in boardrooms. So big boardroom decisions don't get made just because you've got the right logical answer, the perfect strategy, but whether you can make people feel emotionally safe. Because in big decisions, the emotional safety counts far more than whether this is the right or wrong logical or financial decision.
Right. And how do you give that emotional safety?
Well, so looking back, right, I had to go through like therapy and coaching just to process that situation because it was extremely traumatic. But what I got from my coach, he summarized it best when he said, you need to connect before you correct. you need to make people feel like you understand them, you hear them, you're on their team before what you say. They won't listen to anything that you say until you meet that criteria, right? So that means even as simple as, first of all, help me understand. What are your concerns? I hear you. I acknowledge that. That is a valid concern. Before I even tell you what I think should be done, right? Like that. So I think many leaders and managers, we don't do this enough, right? We don't create that emotional or psychological safety.
Right. I love that. And you're right? When making big decisions, you just have to make sure that everyone emotionally feels safe and connected. Even I'm reflecting on me personally, sometimes if, say, for example, I had a really rough or challenging day, and then I'm presented with a decision and there's some risk associated with the decision, I find myself slightly more risk averse on these days because I'm maybe emotionally, something's bothering me already, and I can't deal with something else, But had I looked at the same decision or question at the different state of mind, right, then I would have made a different decision. So it's really, and to connect emotionally, what does that sort of mean in practice?
Well, first, I call it, one model we use in a technique called motivational interviewing, which is a very simple psychological technique called the OARS framework, OARS. O stands for open-ended questions. What goes through your mind right now when faced with this situation, right? A few other questions just to kind of hear them out. A, actively listen and affirm. I can see where you're coming from. Doesn't mean I agree. I can hear you. I can see where you're coming from. I would feel that way if I were you, looking at where, from your perspective. That goes a long way. R is when we reflect. For example, right, let's say we go back to your friend who was reluctant to take a vaccine, right? I guess you're also concerned about your health. So health matters to you. Likewise, health matters to me, right? Make people go, yeah, actually what matters is not the vaccine part, but we both want what is the best for our health. So you build that common ground, right? Then you can then synthesize and summarize, hey, what's a common way to work forward? Like, what do we kind of connect and agree with so that we can then build on from that? So these are some, kind of ways that we have to remind ourselves as leaders. First and foremost is just be curious, open-ended questions rather than being directive. Genuinely listen. So most people, when they follow this, I'm like, okay, the first test is, do you ask like, okay, so help me understand where you're coming from? And immediately you start going into solution, right? The first test is, do you have a follow-up question? Because then that shows genuine interest, right? Do you acknowledge the emotion that person comes from? Right? Do you kind of potentially understand the belief that might be holding them back? So kind of making you go through that, okay, I feel like I can really see where this person's coming from. I may completely disagree with your position, but I first need to make you feel truly heard and understood.
And sometimes I would imagine that just by hearing them out, maybe you might even change your mind slightly about
and nothing wrong with that, right? Yeah,
right, about what the right answer is. Right. And as you said, like that genuine curiosity, I feel is very important.
Yeah.
So if people apply this technique to what I imagine what you will want to avoid is you use it purely as a persuasion tool, but not as a tool to actually connect.
Correct.
And to find a solution.
And a very important principle to that is, are you also doing the reverse? Meaning, like, for example, as a leader, how often do we ask our team members for feedback? Right? Because if we're only giving feedback, but we don't show we can take it, right? And here's the challenge, right? Because if you went to a team member and said, how am I as a boss? Oh, you're good for a boss. But imagine if you ask for something specific. Right? Hey, like that team meeting? I'm not sure I open that meeting or handle that difficult situation the best I could have? What do you think I could have done differently? So number one, you're asking for something specific, right? You're not really seeking validation, and you're more likely to get specific feedback. And you say, thank you, I didn't see it that way. So next time, people are going to be more open to receiving feedback from you because you've modeled how to receive feedback, right? And this is kind of part of, connecting as a leader that we sometimes miss.
I reminded, actually, in the past, this is a higher meeting. Many years ago, we were using this particular HR system. And in this particular HR system, you can actually request for feedback. So you can send a colleague like a request, hey, can you give me feedback for this thing and that? And in order to promote this culture, I remember every time I would always go to the system and request publicly for feedback as a CEO or founder, right? Hey, comment on how I conducted town hall today. And then, we've forgotten that now. Like, we don't do it anymore. And I feel it's such an important thing. Right? So you lead by example.
Right.
You just ask people for something specific. Then people will know. That it makes it easier for them to know what feedback to give.
Right. Because even like that, right? Town hall. Right. To me, the risk is, hey, he's the boss. Town hall, good boss. But if you showed this is one part that I think I might not have handled well. You show that you are kind of like, I need to do better there, right? Then people can kind of they can build on it and give you much more specific and actionable feedback.
Yeah. Right. So you sort of make it feel safe to give feedback.
Right? Because you are seeking it and you are very specific, which means you're genuine, right? You're not looking for hey, was town hall good, huh? Good, right?
Right. And you also show that you're self-aware, but you identify something yourself.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. And it's a very important skill. I sometimes wonder, Azran, I also believe in this type of philosophy of leadership. And sometimes I look at, some of these big companies who, as an example, I look at those Elon Musk companies, and the way I see him from the outside operate the company, he does not look like someone who cares about feedback, as an example, And I'm sure there are many more examples of CEOs who operate like this. And I just wonder sometimes, am I right? Who's right? Where's that? How do you find this balance? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you know where I'm going with this. But.
Well, yeah, so sometimes there's this, is it because of or in spite of, right? It's a bit like, probably most of us might know this one relative or uncle who is 80 years old, smokes and drinks and goes, I don't need a healthy lifestyle. So does that mean that smoking and drinking is good for your health just because of that one uncle? There are always exceptions, right? And that's part of being a leader, is to realize, okay, look, in the case of Elon, he probably is someone who's super smart, right? And that, he compensates for other parts. Are we as smart as Elon? Or do we need to rely more on our team members for ideas? Right? And sometimes the danger of being a solo founder is everybody expects you to have the answer.
Yeah, right. Tell me about it. Yes, that's right.
Right, super lonely.
Yes. And I have to be the pillar. In fact, not just the person with the answer, but if things are on fire, I have to show that I in a sense, because everyone's going to look at my reaction to every situation. Right? So if I'm showing I'm panicking or I'm very concerned, that affects the mood of the entire company.
Absolutely.
So I always have to be the one with the answer, the one with the confidence or the conviction, if you like it. And then learning also when and where I can be vulnerable. Because you also don't want to be like this, this fake, everything is great kind of person. But everyone knows that he cannot not be concerned, So, yeah.
So there's another part that I think I would credit my stress management over the last 20 years, 15 years, I think, is my own personal board of directors. Because as a leader, right, you don't have that safe space to really process your biggest fears and doubts and insecurities. And frankly, we do have a lot of them, right? And if you just try to keep it here, it has a tendency to just keep going on nonstop, right? So in a way, what I have is a group of 7 other guys. They're all CEOs in non-competing industries. And we meet like a board. Now we meet 6 times a year, like 4-hour block. And this whole process of like just updating each other. The hardest thing we have to do as CEOs is not judge, and it's not telling people what to do, right? Because we tend to be problem solvers, right? You come up with a problem, okay, this is how you should handle it. But it's just that safe space, to hold that space for people to just talk about it. And then one is you have the space, because if I have to explain to people what I'm going through, I gotta first make it more sense in my head. 2, you hear what others are going through and you realize, I'm not the only idiot in the room. Other people are also scared, right? And 3, when you end up and say, having gone through this process, I think for me personally, for the next couple of months, here's something I want to focus on. You decide what you want to work on, right? And next month, when you present, if I didn't do anything, I feel bad, right? So now they create accountability. Just the power of, these peer support groups, which I think are very effective. Mentors can play that role, but that's why there's a big difference between ad hoc mentoring versus having someone like, for example, a coach that you see monthly or quarterly, or having a group of peers that gets together regular. That regular cadence helps tremendously because they can see your evolution, right? So 5 out of the 7 other guys, they've been with me for 15 years because they've seen the ups and downs, and I've seen their ups and downs in different phases of our lives. That's super powerful. Without that, I think I don't know how I would have been able to cope.
Oh, I love that. How do you assemble this personal board of directors?
Well, in my case, I am a member of a global CEO organization called YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and these, what they call forums, they set it up. But even now with my, some of my leaders at Naluri, I'm helping them set up their own peer groups, right? So that they have their own space with people from outside.
Well, do you have any sort of personal daily types of habits that you feel help you manage, like stress and all that?
Well, so obviously besides working out first thing in the morning, a couple of things. Number one, my Monday morning journaling time. Partly because I work out 6 days a week, and Monday's like, okay, rest and recovery day. So I just use that to journal, right? Like, how was my last week? What am I looking forward to this week? What do I think are my biggest challenges? Just writing it down, right? I've been doing it for like the last 5 years. Then kind of like Friday afternoons is my reflecting time. Like, okay, what went well? What didn't go well? What have I learned? What do I need to call and follow up on? Just kind of blocking that private space. Because I think the problem with most of us as leaders is our calendars quickly get hijacked with tasks and fires that need to be put out, right? Or deals that need to be attended. But where's our time to process?
All right. I love that this speaks time. I used to try to journal every day.
I gave that. So that's why for me, Monday mornings was my sweet spot.
Right. So at least you block out once a week to do that, right? And that sort of sets you up for the week. Are there specific questions you ask yourself on Monday, man?
So kind of what's my overall theme for the week? What was the magic moment from last week? What's something I'm really looking forward to this week? And my top 3 things that I really want to do. So I might list out like 10 things for the week, but like I always underline 3 things. If I can only do 3 things, what are the 3 things that will make this week special? And then I also remind myself, okay, look, you know what? What are the 3 things that only I can do? Right? And in that 1 year, so let's say 52 times that I write, it may end up being a total of not more than 8 or 10. Because many things I have to write again. Like I wrote the same 3 things last week. I'm writing the same 3 things this week. It's just kind of, for me, that imprinting, right? Because many times we have a tendency to act just because we can. But is this something that only we can do?
Right. And does that sort of, is that sort of a way to help you prioritize?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because then you realize, okay, the reason why those three things are the most important, because it really is about, this is what I cannot delegate, right? These are the things that we are working on the business as opposed to working in the business, which can suck us up too much, right?
Right. Yes, and I think also one important thing about writing all these priorities up front is, I don't know if this is you, but I'm terrible at email. I'm terrible at email because I always felt that email is someone's demand on my time, whereas I'm trying to control where I direct my time to. So I'm always, every day when I start, I just figure out actually what are the few things I should get done today. I don't care about what's in the inbox.
Correct. That I think is a very important practice, right? Like there should be schedule time for email, right? I think the worst thing you can do as leaders is to be a slave to your notifications, right? Unread emails. Yes.
Right. And it's very easy to be pulled in.
Like, because it's so easy. Oh yeah, okay, I can act, right? But then you're reacting, right? There's a time and place to kind of respond to it because people do need answers, but you're like, okay, definitely not more than an hour a day, right? Maybe it's like 4 15-minute chunks or 2 30-minute chunks, but that's it.
Right. Do you have any personal passions that you sort of had to put off as part of you building Naluri or building a company?
Wow. Well, I would love to have done more personal investing in other founders, but clearly, like, all my resources are used to keeping Naluri afloat. Because there have been like many years like no salary, right? So personal cash is a bit tight, but I definitely I do enjoy like making a few angel investments and kind of checking in on fellow founders. It just gives me so much more energy.
Right. I would love to be able to like help people and all that, right? So give back. Right. But
there's a difference between advice and when you're like, okay, I'm putting a little bit of money in this, right? Like, like you create a bond.
Right. So it's not just advice that I'm really betting on. Because advice is free, anyone can say anything.
Anyone can say anything, right? But like, hey, you know what? I'm it.
Right. Do you get to meet many founders and advise them, even on a casual?
I do, but very rare. Like I think I probably made 5 investments.
Oh, right. But even as like a mentor, do you have time, or do you do that without investing?
Like for example, now one of the things I try to do as part of my immersion into the Philippines is I connected with the guy who runs Founders Institute in the Philippines. Hey, I'd love to be a mentor for the Filipino founders, right? It may not necessarily have any direct benefit to Naluri, but just helps me be immersed in society.
Right.
Because that's an area I can add value, right?
Right. So you bring value to them. At the same time, you learn about the culture. All right. That's interesting. So I'm going to like leadership a bit. Yeah. I mean, you've obviously you've led different kind of companies. All right. You were McKinsey, the AirAsia X. iFlix is more like an entrepreneurial company. AirAsia X feels like it's very entrepreneurial, but it's also somewhat established as a corporate, right?
In many ways, it actually felt very much like you got to build from scratch. The thing about the reason AirAsia X was set up as a separate company is because AirAsia didn't want to do it. Right. They didn't believe in long haul, right? And we paid AirAsia a brand license fee.
Okay.
Right. So like, okay, now that like I'm raising our own private equity capital, our own license, our own team, pay them a brand license fee rather than creating a new brand, right? It didn't make sense. So use the AirAsia.com website, but we had to sink or swim on our own.
Oh, right. Well, I actually didn't know the dynamics of this, right? On the outside, it looks like it's the same company. Right. And then all those different experiences, how do you think it's contributed to the way you lead your teams now?
Well, I think number one, team composition is really critical. Like I'm very conscious of team bias, right? So when you have, let's say, a team of 6 or a team of 8? Is there groupthink? Are we quickly narrowing in down on a certain perspective just because we're all comfortable? Do we come from different thinking styles and experiences? That's why, for example, I think what made AirAsia X magical was me versus Moses Devanayagam. Moses had been in the airline industry for 35 years before retiring to join me as my operations director. Right? He brought a wealth of understanding how every nut and bolt in person in the airline industry works. But he was magical because he had an open mind. He wouldn't tell me like, this is how you do things. But he said, oh, you want to look at it differently? Okay, but then we have to address this, right? Likewise, iFlix worked because Mark Britt had built internet television in Australia. So when he came over, when Patrick brought the two of us together, like we had these different experiences and skill sets, right? And likewise, me and Jeremy now with Naluri. I think that's super important, like that leadership composition.
Right, like diverse skill sets.
But at the same time, like same passion for the problem that you want to tackle.
Right. And when everyone is so obviously experienced and skilled in their domain, and most likely, as you mentioned, you also want to avoid groupthink. How do you manage disagreements?
Oh, okay, that's super cool. I had some really difficult disagreements, which is why when we started Naluri, one of the earliest things that Jeremy and I decided on, I think we might be the earliest stage company in Malaysia or perhaps even in the region to hire and pay for a non-executive chairman. We said, let's find someone that we both trust and respect and both agree that in the event of any major conflict, we go to that person as the ultimate arbiter. Plus, if we can find someone who has that gravitas, that will also help balance our board versus our investors, right? Because VC investors can be aggressive, right? Like, if you're not careful as a founder, you get steamrolled. But if you have a non-executive independent chairman who is super, has that stature, right? You create a balanced board. We even had a search, like we went to the Institute of Corporate Directors Malaysia, looked at different director profiles, and we landed on Dr. Chong Sulin. She is a medical doctor, MBA, former CEO of Prince Court Hospital and Sunway Medical Hospital and IMU Healthcare, and today on the board of AIA, right? So retired, but with that track record and profile, she has the stature, but she also is a really friendly, helpful person, full of advice, full of energy. And because she's someone that both of us respect, we know, okay, in the event of any conflict, we go to her.
Wow, that's really cool. All right. And I suppose, is it often you have many conflicts? If you don't go to her, like within the team, are there ways?
Yeah, I think as a team, I think we do. We've had some really tough conversations, but for the most part, I think we kind of try to map out, right, between the 5-6 of us. How do we land on the situation?
I'm not sure if it's a positive or not. One positive of being a solo founder is that, sometimes I'm the tiebreaker. When the room disagrees, and I say, everyone's saying different things, and okay, I heard all of you, but I think we should go that, or we should go right now, and I guess most of the time I'll just say, okay, you've spoken. So I
could use that card. I have never used that card in Naluri.
Right. So you try to get
if not, it's not the right time.
Group of people. Oh, interesting. Right.
I wouldn't say full consensus, but at the very least, I think for Jeremy and I to be aligned. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's very important, right? Yeah, because what you want to avoid is people they feel forced to go with it, and they will never sort of execute.
Not 100% bought in, right?
Right. Yeah, that's something I'm learning to. Everyone can say yes, but you need them to really say yes.
Yeah. And also, I think one of the things I learned is not every decision needs to be made then and then. Many times we feel that's the decision, this is the right time, just do it, right? No point waiting anymore. But sometimes a day, a week, it doesn't really kill things, but people just may need that thinking space to come around.
Right. Okay. Has the concept of the word success maybe mean differently to you over the years?
Oh, probably very much so. I think in the early years, a lot of it, like your identity was associated with the business that you're building. I mean, I think maybe I was at my egotistical peak at AirAsia X, right? Oh, that's my baby, right? Oh, IPOing it, $1 billion, right? Like me, right? I think 2014 did a pretty good job at smashing that ego, deflating that ego. I think now, I would think the bigger focus is like this, both the combination of that crazy mission, like right now, can we make mental health insurable? And also seeing my leaders, Tiffany and Aiden, kind of like stepping up and making that happen. And for me, it's like paving the space and the path for them. I feel it's just a lot more value and meaning than me.
And as your sort of like your worldview change, like since you're running those.
Yeah, I think for sure. Right now, for example, I'm pretty obsessed about like generational differences. I realize, how my larger than life bosses used to lead and manage me is very different from how I need to lead the Gen Z employees. And at the same time, I think I'm also a believer that our generation's unique. We're probably going to have to kind of keep going well into our 70s, not into our 60s, for the simple reason, number one, lifespan's going to increase dramatically, and not necessarily from a historical demographic trend, but actually some really amazing breakthroughs in healthcare that I see in the next 10 years that's really going to increase lifespan. But at the same time, that means, most of us are not going to have enough to retire, not have an income for 40 years. We can do it for 20 years, not 40. So we're still going to have to need to earn, right? But also because the number of people who are entering the workforce is dramatically shrinking, right? So organizations also need to figure out, look, you know what? I need to keep my people on well into their 70s. You're right. Right? So these things kind of, for me, like, you start thinking in decades now rather than like in the past. Okay, what's the annual plan? Right?
So it's sort of related. I've got two related questions. The first one is, as you mentioned, your lifespan is increasing and all that. And I don't really get this question, but I was talking about AI. So how do you see AI evolving the healthcare world even more? And is there anything that you are looking at as a...
Okay, so first, I have to preface the whole lifespan and health span increasing. Unfortunately, it is bifurcating. I mean, people who have got good access to healthcare, longer lifespans, but unfortunately, the majority of people, that lifespan may even either stagnate or decline, just because access to care is going to be a major issue going forward. So that's why like this whole inequality and of access is a major thing for me. But at the same time, so for example, we become more precise and personalized. So let's talk about, say, 4 things that could really drive that lifespan for cool, like breakthrough things, right? Number 1, bioprinting of organs, right? So imagine like your heart no longer works, your liver doesn't work, right? You know, like how hard it is to get like a kidney transplant. But imagine if we could bioprint kidneys. Number 2, gene editing. So remember we talked about, hey, I've got the triple crown Malay genes. Well, I don't really only have to rely on epigenetics to kind of like change my lifestyle. Like with CRISPR technology, probably it's 10 years out, like you can start to edit genes, right? So as you start to identify certain cancers that might have a genetic link, Alzheimer's, etc., you can start editing it. Precision oncology. Cancer today, which is a big cause of death, right, is actually very brute force. Chemotherapy, like it really smash you with these crazy drugs with the hope that while it kills the cancerous drugs, it's also going to kill off a lot of healthy drugs, right? That's why like chemotherapy is like really awful for a lot of people. AI algorithms are allowing us to be a lot more hyper-personalized. And so success rates for cancer treatments can become very much like, I think there'll be a step change in improvement in accuracy. And let's say fourth, probably for me, that I worry a lot about is dementia and Alzheimer's. And again, like we're now seeing algorithms, like how do we detect it early? One of the biggest issues with dementia and Alzheimer's is you don't know it until it's too late. What we take to kind of, what are the data sets that will allow us to do early prediction, early personalized interventions, right? So a lot of these super cool things, partly very, AI and digital technology will enable these breakthroughs that then suddenly is sort of an average 80-year lifespan. Most of us, okay, maybe let me preface that in Malaysia, let's say you're in the top 1%, you probably have a 50% chance of getting to 100.
All right. And then Naluri into any of these areas?
So I think for us, our focus, for example, is using AI algorithms to detect emotional distress, right? Because if I can detect it earlier, then when you actually say, I'm at the breakdown point, right, I can do a lot more to help you then, right? So we're very focused on our part, right, as opposed to all these other parts.
Right.
But a lot of kind of the thought process of how you structure it's very similar, right? Like what are the different data sets? How do you marry those data sets and look for really interesting patterns?
So the other thing I also want to ask you, based on what you said earlier, was obviously people, one reason why people end up working longer is because there's less people, I guess, working at the, in the early stages, right? The workforce is smaller. But at the same time, you hear all these stories about AI reducing jobs, right? For like graduates and all that, right? So the workforce is smaller, but there's also an argument saying jobs are smaller. I don't know what your view is in general of this, what's happening.
So I'm in the camp of jobs will evolve. And maybe a good example in the medicine field is radiology. Radiologists used to be these specialists, right, who will study for decades to look for tiny patterns in your X-ray, your MRI, your CT scan, or hairline fracture or early cancer cells. Right? Today, AI algorithms will be far more accurate than even the most experienced radiologists. So does that mean a radiologist as a job is no longer relevant? It's evolved. So it's less about the detection part. But imagine now, how do I synthesize that information and communicate it to other doctors and the patient? So the human part becomes even more critical, right? So I think a lot of jobs will shift. A lot of what we perhaps might use, if we spent 10 hours a week on analysis, maybe that's going to come down to 1. But the 9 hours now shift towards, insights. I came from a world, Derek, I started working in 1995. Back then, to create today like a PowerPoint slide that I could probably do in a minute or two, we used to handwrite it. We used to have like this white paper or, if we made a mistake, fax it over to a specialist team to produce a chart, which we're going to get the next day, right? And then you got to get it back, right? So there was a lot. I mean, we can do a lot more now, right? But it's just the mix of the tasks that you do, less of the AI. I think will systematize the predictable. But we need to humanize the exceptional.
Right.
And I think any job does have that exception point. Because remember, connect before we correct, that we become even more emotional and psychologically safe. I cannot convince you to make a decision purely on data. The data is going to help me. But how do we build that human connection? Whether you're selling, whether you're doing account management, hiring decisions, right?
There still needs to be like a human being at the end of most of these.
Where's the right moments, the right magical touch points?
Yes, right. And then there's also to like you talk about the radiologists and all that. I imagine there's some things like healthcare where demand is almost infinite, right? As in, if you use AI, you can one radiologist can just do more. right? And then every medical profession can just help more people. In a similar way.
Yeah. So, for example, in Naluri, today, if you only use telemedicine consultations, right, on Zoom or Meets, a psychologist would probably be maxed out at 50 to 60 clients per month. My full-time psychologist, 800. Because we use a lot of decision support tools, self-help tools, kind of AI emotion sentiment detection, prioritization, triage, so that I can help a lot more people. So I only get involved in the critical moments. And today a psychologist, but you know what they spend a lot of time on? Note-taking and synthesis and documentation. Guess what AI is really good at? Right?
Right, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you can help more people, right?
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously we are in the recruitment business. So I'm like super fascinated with what's happening, and I'm also very curious. And I imagine that I'm also obviously in the camp where I have to be in this camp in some sense, that there will be a lot of more interesting jobs that will come out of this, and technology will help us help more people. I'm also wondering whether in the short term, things might have to get worse before it gets better. I don't know. Because like the knee-jerk reaction for using technology sometimes is to reduce jobs. Like the new jobs haven't appeared yet. You know why?
Could be, or a lot of us will have to be retrained. And as leaders, we have to start saying, look, how are we retraining ourselves? How are we still doing things the same way we used to do 5 years ago?
How do you hope going back to mental health, how do you hope like Malaysia as a society will view mental health, going forward? Like what changes do you hope to see?
Well, to me, again, remember that correlation between diabetes and depression. Today, if someone came to you and says, hey, I've got a diabetes diagnosis, probably not a lot of stigma, right? 25% of Malaysians have it. I think that's the future where we recognize, mental health means, you are under a specific situation, your hormones are not balanced, you probably need to kind of work on it to improve. That's not an issue, right?
Right.
It's just a health condition.
Right.
And I think partly for me as a leader is to say, we have to normalize it. Like as leaders too, hey guys, I need a day off. I'm going for my therapy session because I've got to work on my mental health.
Right.
That it's no longer just seen as an illness or weakness, but like your physical health. Is physical health only just going to a doctor when you're sick? Or are you starting to exercise? Are you doing strength training and cardio and mobility and flexibility? Why are you doing all of that? Guess what? Mental health is the same exact thing. Physical health, endurance. Mental health, resilience. Physical health, strength. Mental health, focus and concentration. Physical health, flexibility. Mental health, curiosity. Looking at any problem from different angles. Physical health, balance and coordination. Mental health, coordinating or connecting with different people. Those are all muscles that need to be trained. Right? So whether it is a leadership and training program, or even how do I work on building positive mental fitness, so that working on mental health is not seen as a stigma, but it is just like I got to go to the gym, I got to go see my therapist.
Do you think it'd be helpful to sort of, because you gave the example earlier, there's this group now, the 45 to 55, something like that, and they have a lot of like work pressures. They're the middle management managing the CEO downward, and also personal life. There's so much going on, and by changing the way it's positioned, they become more like that.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like just coping with stress,
right. Just making it, coping.
And sometimes it, even better is sleep. If I offer anyone, hey, are you dealing with early insomnia where you try to put your head on the pillow, you don't fall asleep after 45 minutes? Are you dealing with intermediate insomnia where you wake up 2 or 3 times in the middle of the night? Are you dealing with terminal insomnia? After 3 hours, you cannot fall asleep again. Has this been recurring at least 2 or 3 times each week? Can we help you with it? And more open, right? So that's kind of an entryway.
Yeah.
Guess what? How I help you with it, right? Like, mindfulness, eating habits, relationships, stress techniques, breathing techniques. How do you get ready for your morning? How do you get ready in the evening? Same with that, I think.
Right. And instead of making it about mental health, we make it about sleep. Right. And of course, everyone wants to, sleep well. I mean, yeah. Okay. Last two questions.
Sure.
If you would say fast forward to the future, and I hope Naluri goes really well, and you've achieved what you need to achieve. When someone looks back at you as an entrepreneur, like Azran as an entrepreneur, how would you like to be described? How would you hope to be there?
No, I think hopefully I've done my part to generate a whole new generation of entrepreneurs, whole new generation of business leaders and seniors.
Right.
That'd be cool. Because then you create this multiplier effect. It's not just about the venture you've built, but you've helped people feel motivated, courage, example for them to then take off and build the next generation of venturers, next generation of leaders.
And for those who do want to be a leader or entrepreneur, I'm sneaking another question. What truth about entrepreneurship do you think most people are not ready to hear?
I think it's the kind of the loneliness, the fears, the insecurity, kind of that dark side of entrepreneurship, the imposter syndrome, right? It can be crippling even, right? And so just like how I need, let's say if I'm an engineer, I also need finance skills. I need HR skills or marketing skills. How do I build a brand? How do I also handle, what does it mean to manage my energy levels, manage my moods, manage my motivations? If I don't, and I just somehow allow it to happen, like, how does that work, right? Are you just is that how you would manage your finances or your brand? No, same thing.
Right. And I suppose, so a lot of people see what's amazing about being an entrepreneur, but actually, well, I suppose in some sense they know it's tough, but you don't really know it until you do it, right?
Yeah.
Everyone keeps saying it's hard, but when you do it, you know what it means. Right. So even as we are speaking somewhat like in theory, I mean, not immediately, obviously we do the thing, but you can read all these stories, but you don't really.
You know what I know, right?
Yeah.
It's a bond.
Yes. And then sometimes I understand the logic of how I should be responding, and I understand the logic of I shouldn't be doing that. But it's so different when you're in it. So. And so last question, what do you see next for Naluri? Like what's your short, medium, long term goals?
Well, for me, this month, we're really excited to do our 5th big research project for World Mental Health Day in October. How we quantify mental health across the different countries in ASEAN, across the different age groups and job functions, and what the issues people are wrestling with, what's similar, what's different this year. I think in the long term, how does that, as I said, translate into how does it become part of health insurance so that it becomes more accessible and more affordable? And really finding new creative ways to kind of make it more accessible. Like, for example, this year our big theme was putting it in Microsoft Teams, as I mentioned, right? I think new platforms are emerging, so it's not about here's what we're building, but how do we make what we're building more accessible, make it where people like to be, rather than insisting they come to you on your own platform.
Right. Yes, and I always find that if you, again, when there's once we're using too many different tools, and you end up not using it because everyone just focus on one or two tools.
Exactly.
So thank you, Azran, for coming in and sharing your story. I love the free coaching I got. And also, as I mentioned at the start, I've always looked up to you as an entrepreneur, and to be able to be here asking you questions is a privilege, and I really have.
Derek, pleasure's all mine and honor is mine. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Admin. All right, thanks for hanging out with us and getting to the end of the episode. If you like this, follow us or hit the subscribe button. It will help us bring on more amazing guests and makes the whole show better for you. So thanks again and see you in the next one.